Hi, everyone, and welcome to the July APMA PodMed student webinar on how to prepare for externships. My name is Abhinav Leva, and I am currently a fourth-year podiatric medical student at the California School of Podiatric Medicine. I also serve as the APMSA student liaison to the APMA Board of Trustees. APMA is excited to offer this webinar today. We want to share the experiences of my fellow fourth years, along with any insight or advice they may have for other students in preparing for externships. We will feature a lot of Q&A during this webinar, and attendees are able to ask questions throughout the broadcast by submitting their questions through the question box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar toolbar. Joining me today, we have Akram Aljamal from Temple University, Israel Bowers from Des Moines University, College of Podiatric Medicine and Surgery, and Hector Santiago from Barry. So welcome, everyone. And with that being said, we have the APMA Career Development Manager, Tiffany Kildale. She will be helping me moderate the questions for the group this afternoon, so I will now turn it over to her.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for attending, and thank you, Abhinav. We are lucky enough to have Abhinav stick around and join us in today's panel, and thanks to all of you for listening in. So again, just a quick reminder to reiterate what Abhinav said earlier, you guys can submit your questions through the question box in your GoToWebinar toolbar. Those come straight to me and I'll just read them back to the panel. So in the meantime, let's jump right in. Our first question, I'm going to open this one up to the full group. What do you all look for in an externship program? Hector, do you want to start us off on that one?
Yeah, I can. One of the things I look for mainly is a trauma program or programs that I'm going to have a lot of exposure to, like an ER and a good ED relationship. That was one of the main things I looked for when I was looking for externships. I also looked for geographically location. I was trying to stay in a particular area of the country. So that was also a big factor for me.
That's good. Abhinav, how about you?
Sort of what Hector mentioned about trauma, but I also like wound care, so I look for a lot of programs that are involved with wound care itself. Just because where I want to end up practicing has a lot of diabetic patients and there's a high prevalence of wound care in the area. And also geographic area matters a lot to me. So a lot of the programs I picked were sort of around the area where I want to end up practicing.
Interesting. Okay, I wouldn't have thought of that. So you're kind of looking at it in terms of, you know, maybe the specialty that you want to pursue as well as where you could see yourself practicing. Akram, how about you?
I agree with both of them. I think that geography was my biggest consideration. My family's in Michigan, so I looked for Midwestern programs mainly. And then I wasn't entirely sure whether I would take the trauma or the wound care route. So I kind of chose programs that highlighted all of them. So one that was really known for its wound care, one that was known for how much trauma it got, and hopefully that would kind of dictate my decision for me. But like Abhinav said, you do want to look for a program kind of sort of in the area that you want to eventually practice in.
Awesome. Israel, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think all my colleagues hit on some very good points on what to do in terms of looking for an externship. Personally, I'm one of those types of people that hasn't really developed a sense of what direction I kind of want to go in with my professional career, whether it's focusing on wound care or sports medicine. So I mostly looked for well-rounded programs that were going to offer me a lot of different opportunities and experiences. I wasn't particularly looking for any kind of geographical area, so I kind of applied all pretty broadly around.
So in Israel, we can start with you on this next question, and then sort of just you all feel free to chime in. How useful did you all find the externship survey to give a good idea about a program?
I thought that the externship survey was great. I know that some people don't necessarily always put what they truly feel, but I thought most of the answers were very sincere. The externship survey itself was helpful in determining what I thought was a good program. Many of the externs that had filled out that survey mentioned whether or not there was a lot of trauma going on at that particular place, whether they felt like the residents were doing the surgeries as opposed to just watching, and I thought it provided a lot of really good information. I wish that there was more responses on it. The externship survey didn't have as many responses, and obviously didn't cover all of the externships that are out there, but I think it did a pretty good job of showing us what is out there and kind of what to look for.
I totally agree. I think more responses would have been super helpful, but overall, it was a good guide picking out programs that you were kind of unsure about or haven't heard a lot of information on.
Agreed. I think when picking programs, I looked at the externship survey to kind of tell me what my month would look like, and then more specifically the residency survey to kind of see, is this a program that I should spend a month at? If, you know, are people enjoying their 3-year experience there? And that kind of dictates whether or not you do want to spend time there.
Yeah, just agreeing with all of them. I also looked at it as how busy am I going to be, or how much time will I have to study afterwards, because a lot of fourth years, a lot of self-studying. So the externship survey definitely helped me sort of plan on like which months do I want a certain program to sort of allocate enough studying time for boards and stuff.
That makes sense. All really good feedback. Thank you for that. So can you all share a little bit and sort of fill folks in, sort of walk us through, how does the clerkship application process work, or the externship application process work, and sort of what's it like? Akram, do you want to start us off on this one?
Sure. So the way it works is you make a list of programs that you want to visit or, you know, externat, and you give them 3 priority months. So you'll have a first choice, a second choice, and a third choice, and that's dependent upon what your school offers. So for me at Temple, my school offers us to clerk between the months of June and January. They dictate what month is going to be a base month back at Philadelphia, and what month is a medical rotation, and then you have 6 to choose from there. And then you're capped at the amount of times you can list a program generally, and you're capped at the amount of programs you can list. So you can't list the month of October 50 times, for instance. And after the first round of you kind of sending out your preferences, they will come back and tell you, well, you requested as your second choice for XYZ hospital the month of October, and they're willing to offer that for you. And you can accept it, or you may recognize that another program that you preferred a little bit more also offered you October. So you know, accept your more preferred program for that month, and then you just keep going down the list for 3 rounds. Typically, by the second round, most students have filled up most of their spots. It's not abnormal to have to go to a second round at all. It doesn't mean that, you know, your programs don't like you. But for me, for instance, I had to go to 3 rounds because I just kept getting the same programs offering me the same month, and that's not abnormal either.
Yeah, so at Barry, it's kind of similar. We have months May through December, so we have a total of 8 months we could choose an externship from, with an option of having a home month, which is when we come back to Miami and work in a Barry clinic. So you can, it's like a lottery system. So you like pick 3 options, and then the administration picks for you any months out of those 8. Then you also have the option to take a vacation month, which most students take December as a vacation month to study for boards. But you can fill that month in with an externship if you would like. So you can have a total of like 7 externships within that time, but you only need 6 to graduate. But Akram nailed it. That's pretty much, I went into round 2. I didn't go to round 3, but I did have to go to round 2 to pick certain months like more unfilled due to me getting like 2 offers for one particular month versus just filling that 1 month that I was missing.
Yeah, just like what they said.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So CSPM offers only 5 externship months, so it's anywhere from June to December, and we do have the same thing, like 2 base months or 3, whatever the rotation you're on requires you to be there for the month. And then for myself, I actually made a whole schedule. We get our months ahead of time, so I made like different scenarios of what programs I wanted. I had like an Excel sheet, and just went off of that. I was fortunate enough to just end it at round one, just because I knew which programs I wanted and got in contact with the residents ahead of time to see what can be done, like as far as scheduling or what month should I be looking at. There are certain programs that don't offer a clerkship a certain month. So you kind of want to make sure that you're not wasting a slot where, like, say, an XYZ program, you want it for June, but in reality, they don't offer a clerkship in June. So you don't want to waste that slot. So it's a good habit to get in contact with the program to make sure that which months do they have a certain clerkship available or something like that, so that you can apply accordingly.
I think that's also really good advice, just because also they'll know your name once they get your application. So it kind of like helps get your foot in the door without really like ever being there.
Yeah, so everyone's kind of said some really good things about the whole clerkship process. I think Abhinav's a little bit more of the rare ones. I think most people end up going to at least the second round, if not the third round. In fact, Abhinav's the only one that I know that got everything out in the first round. So if you get to the second round, like Akram said, don't be worried about it. You're gonna get good programs, and programs are gonna want to have you there at their programs. I think one thing that I was told when I was applying for clerkships was, getting in touch with these programs beforehand and not necessarily asking them, hey, let me go to your program, but just getting in touch with them and letting them know that you exist. If they have a name in their heads and they have your name and they see that on the list of 100 students that are applying, then they'll recognize that name and they may accept you. It may be more likely that they put you down for that month. And another thing that I found helpful as well was you can put an option, a first, second, and third option for all these programs. But one of the things that I personally did was, if there was a program that I really wanted for a particular month, I only gave them the one option. I didn't give them this month, and this month. I put it for that 1 month, and it just gives them no other alternative but to either give you that month or just not have you there at all. So I thought that was something that I personally did.
Israel brings up a really good point. If you know that you have to be in a certain area geographically, you may want to list the programs in that region for only that month. If there's a wedding that you really want to attend in August, so you don't want to be on the other side of the country, you don't want to offer that region's programs for, June, July, and August. Focus in on August. And, like Abhinav mentioned earlier, I also had an Excel sheet, so that may help you out to just kind of narrow everything down so that when the application process does come up, what regions you're aiming for and what hospitals you're aiming for.
Yeah, also, like if you're taking your CSP in Philadelphia and you're thinking about doing Northeast programs, that's a good time to just kind of do your externships and schedule your CSP that same month, so you're not traveling back to that area if you're not from that area originally.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want more like information on it, there's I know Rami Basate, who's at Detroit Medical Center, wrote an article in Podiatry Today that outlines what should students consider as far as externships go. I actually read that before applying. It was sort of helpful. But a lot of the externship process is sort of preparing ahead of time and doing the bulk work, like getting your CV done or getting your nice little headshot done, just so that when the time comes, you're just copy and pasting the stuff onto the application and you can just be done within 2 hours or so. I think the hardest part is actually just picking out the programs and
that CV
allocating which months. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in here because we've received a couple of questions, and I think you all have sort of touched on these already. It sounds like, based off of what I think it was Israel said, that yes, you absolutely would recommend contacting the program beforehand that you're interested in. Would you reach out to the resident there, the program director? Who have you all contacted specifically?
So I've only contacted residents, just because it's like a more friendly like environment for me, I feel. Just because they were in your shoes at one point, like more recent than the director was. But there has been certain programs where like the residents just prefer you to contact the director, which I have done that as well. But my first avenue to contact is always the resident, just because like they've been in your shoes like a year or 2 years ago. So they kind of know what you're experiencing and have to go through, and et cetera.
I think it really doesn't matter who you contact. Anyone that you contact at the program is going to give you an advantage. They're going to know your name, and it really does depend on the program, because some programs, the residents, do have a say, and they help out with the residency directors and in choosing who gets to come and clerk, and some places they don't. And so it's just kind of, you don't really know. But I do know from personal experience that having talked to a resident, I was able to get a program at a particular place because they knew my name.
So when you all are contacting these programs, and if you're working or reaching out directly to the residents, what are you asking them? Tell us a little bit about this interaction. Are you just introducing yourself and saying, hi, I want to come here? What does that look like a little bit?
Oh, I can actually read you my message. I have it typed in my Word docs in my computer, but it's describes your name. It says like, hi, I'm Hector. I'm applying to externships, and I just wondering if I can get more information on your program. And I'll say the hospital name. Just like, hey, any insight would be super helpful, and that's pretty much it. And if you knew them, like, so I want to stay like in Florida, and I'm in school in Florida at the moment. So like a lot of the residents down here did go to Barry, so I did know them at one point, or like cross paths. So I would say like, hey, hope you're doing well. Like, haven't seen you since XY event, but just kind of being friendly at first. Like, don't just barge in there, like if you know them. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. I reached out to any alumni I knew in the Detroit area. Abhinav mentioned Rami, so if they had already externed through the area, I just said, hey, do you know who I can contact there that may be the best person? They'll either point you to an attending. If they're really comfortable, they'll give you a resident's cell phone number and just say, oh, text XYZ. They'll help you out, point you in the right direction. When I had free time in the area, if I knew a doctor that I shadowed in undergrad, then they would say, hey, come scrub this case with me at XYZ hospital, and you'll meet a lot of the residents there as well. So, and that's not necessary at all to kind of physically be present, but there was one program that had recently opened up. I never got an opportunity to meet the attending, and I just kind of cold emailed him, said, I'm applying for externships. I want to hear a little bit more about your program. I know you recently took over. What sort of changes, have you made, or, what do you think is the highlight of your program? They know that you're at least expressing interest, but not to the point where you're kind of begging for a rotation at their site, which I think, kind of keeps that professionalism.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I think it's all about who you feel comfortable with. I was fortunate enough to know that each and every program that I was applying to, I knew at least one resident that either was an APMSA or a graduate of CSPM. So reaching out to them was pretty easy for me. And I knew some of the residency directors out in Texas as well. But I think it's all about comfort, and also coming out of your comfort shell as well, and just asking as humble as possible, as this is the one time you actually get to learn about a program, and it's a big step in your life. So you want to know as much about a program as possible before you're making your final decision. It's like buying a house. So.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think we touched on this earlier, so forgive me if we've already covered this. Can you reapply to the same program in each round and apply for a different month if you were not accepted in an earlier round? I'm seeing someone shaking their head and someone nodding yes. So,
So it is possible to apply to that same program in another round. The only caveat is that you have a certain amount of times that you can use that program. So if you apply to a particular program, you can put, I want this month, and this month. I think there's some reasoning behind that you can do that. But if you only put 2 months for, say, the first round, and then you get a bunch of other months for other programs, and all those programs accept you for those other months, then you're kind of stuck if you've used up all those months. So basically what I'm trying to say, I'm kind of making it a little bit more complex than it has to be, but you can apply to a certain program for, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4 months total.
It's 3 at first, and then it opens up to 4 round 2.
Okay, yeah. So
So
basically, you can apply to it in multiple rounds.
That is helpful information, and it does sound complex, but Abhinav was the one that had multiple Excel spreadsheets outlining all of his various schedules. So, I mean, I think that in and of itself is impressive. I'm here for it, and I think that's a great pro tip. So, something to take away. So, do externship programs weigh different aspects of your application more heavily than others, like grades versus club involvements? Can you all speak to this? What's your experience been?
I think it depends on the program for sure. And you'll hear it at, whether it be APMA conferences or ACFAS conferences, where residency directors will say, well, I have a hard screen, and if you don't meet this GPA requirement, then I'm sorry, I'm not even looking at the application. And others will say, well, it's a very soft screen, So if you're in that general range, but I like your CV, then that's fine. It really does vary. So I think that the externship application, their own profile on the AACPM website kind of guides you in the right direction. Yeah, hypothetically, if you have a GPA that translates to a 3.0 and their cutoff is a 3.8, then maybe don't be surprised if you didn't get into the round 2 for that program. But a vast majority of them, to my understanding, grades are important for sure, but they're kind of flexible on that. They do look at you as a whole individual. And if they know you, like we said earlier, if you've emailed them in the past, if you visited, then that goes a long way. So even if you don't necessarily meet their grade cutoff, or your extracurriculars aren't necessarily full, you visited, so they know the interest is already there and established, so they're more likely to give you a second look.
each program has like a sheet on the Casper Chris website that kind of just explains like their GPA or their minimum GPA, if you have to be a certain class ranking, stuff like that. So definitely look at that. I mean, I looked at that pretty heavy when I picked the programs that I liked, to make sure that I was within that pool. So I just wanted to be like competitive or like within their standards, so I didn't have a reason to not be like denied or something. So I definitely looked at that pretty heavily when I was choosing programs.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's definitely some programs that are a lot more flexible with their GPA and with their ranges, as Akram has said. But you do definitely want to kind of do that research before you apply to these clerkships. Because in my experience, and from what I've seen from others as well, that for the clerkship itself, they may still accept you at that clerkship, whether or not you're in that GPA range, but they may have that hard, fast rule that if you aren't in their GPA range, you won't get that residency. And so you may still be able to go to that clerkship, but you can use it as a training experience, but otherwise it's kind of a wasted month if they will not be accepting you for a residency spot or even considering you. And so you kind of have to feel out a lot of these places and kind of research into which ones have hard, fast requirements, and as some others may be more flexible.
Yeah, so there's 2 different things that you can look at. There's the clerkship manual or guide or handbook, whatever they call it, on the AA website, and they also have one for the residency. I would cross-reference both of them. There are clerkship programs that don't have a residency, and there are residencies that don't have a clerkship program. Not to say that you shouldn't, if it's a training and you really want to go there, definitely go to that clerkship if you feel like you're going to learn academically. It's all just preference. But for myself, I wanted to make sure that I went to a clerkship that offered a residency, and I was also realistic with myself, like, hey, I have this GPA. What are the chances? If it's something like you have to be the top 2 of your class or something, obviously, you have to be realistic. And if you're at the bottom or in the middle, you have to sort of reconsider your thoughts process of it. Not to discourage anyone. I mean, some programs do look at you during your clerkship month and see how you are with your hands, what your thought process is on diagnosing patients and treating patients. So they do take that into consideration, but just be realistic with yourself through the entire application process for clerkships and also residency.
Yeah, I think that those are really good points. Like Abhinav said, you want to be realistic with yourself. Israel mentioned that a program may take you for a clerkship and not a residency, and mathematically it makes sense. They may take 6 externs and 2 residents, and if you know that you deviate significantly from what their normal is, and their past 3 years of residence have been top 10 students, and you're not in that top 10, you may use that program to get better with your hands, but you should also know that you only have 5 or 6 opportunities for this 1 month long experience. Make sure you pick a program that you have a decent shot at.
Mhm. Also, like we mentioned earlier, when you reach out to people like and they tell you like, oh, we're super trauma heavy, or like you're on call. Like one of the programs that I'm going with, they're on call 28 days a month. They only have 1 weekend off, and you have to be like, am I that type of person that like is cool being on call all month and only have 1 weekend off? So you have to like this is one of the advantages of reaching out, kind of just getting that like insider knowledge before you apply to these programs.
So you all have sort of touched on, what you looked for in a program and sort of what you were looking for in terms of, I can see myself practicing here later on, and that's shifting your scope a little bit. Did you share any concerns in terms of applying to programs in another region separate from your school? Meaning, one of the comments that we got is, I'm worried about applying in other school territories per se. Is that an issue? Is that something someone should be concerned about? All is
I
fair game.
see I see a couple of my colleagues shaking their head no. I disagree. I think that you do have to be realistic with yourself. For instance, I go to Temple. There are a lot of East Coast programs that the Temple students kind of get every year. The city of Philadelphia is almost exclusively Temple students. So do they take students from other schools? Yeah, for sure. You'll find, UPenn will take a kid from Barry or from CSPM every year or whatever it may be. But that also means that these students have been visiting throughout their second and third year. They've already made an impression. Some of those attendings may have lectured at that school a few times. So it's not necessarily that you have no shot at it whatsoever. It's just that that relationship may have already been built for 2 or 3 years, and now you're walking in on a 1 month experience, and maybe you may not be able to break through that. That doesn't mean don't try it. As far as Temple kids going to California, I like to look at these lists, and it's like 2 or 3 kids out of the 20 that have rotated through California programs that end up matching there. Now, maybe that wasn't their preference, but CSPM and Western are trained in a different way. Temple spends their third year in clinic, so we have a lot of time with clinical stuff, and the Philly programs enjoy that, whereas CSPM and Western may be in the hospitals more, so they're more OR oriented, and the California programs, enjoy that. So I think every year people can cross territories and end up in any program they want. They just have to go there, show that they're busting their tails and doing what the program wants. But I think that that is a very significant consideration nonetheless.
I mean,
I do think that there are certainly programs that have a tendency to pick and choose their residents based on geographical location of where they're coming from what school they're coming from. I do think that, however, if you're a good enough applicant and you have a strong work ethic and you are, showing everything you got, you stand a chance at almost any program.
I totally agree. I think some programs do tend to probably lean more towards a certain school. Maybe they're just located closer, like Abhinav was saying, like Philly loves Temple students, etc. But I think if you go there and you like show your worth, you know what I mean? You have every chance that a Temple student can stay in touch, just be a good student, like show that you're there to help and your work ethic can speak volumes. So I wouldn't discourage anyone from applying without like out in those regions. I mean, Florida could be like, people could say that about Florida. I don't really know, but I think you can apply anywhere, and if you just show the right work ethic, you can get there. So
I also think it's a lot of like, if there's a certain program, I know some students don't even think about clerkships, but I know I was thinking about it when I was a first year for some odd reason. But I noticed that this one program accepted a lot of students from a certain program a lot of times. So I was reaching out to them, and if you really like a program and you know you want it, or it's one of your top choices, I'd certainly, it goes back to the whole thing that we talked about earlier, that you should reach out to them, make sure that your presence is known, and that to show the directors and the residents that, hey, I'm interested in this program. What can I do, to shine? And if you do get that month, you take that month as a blessing and you run with it as hard as you can and work really, really hard to show what you're all about. Because it's like speed dating. Every month is a fast speed dating month when it comes to clerkships. You're trying to show off what you're all about and see if your personalities click. You may like a program on paper and then you go there and you're like, I don't think I fit in, like the residents have a certain personality and I have a certain personality, or my values don't match up. So I think it's all about speed dating during clerkships and figuring out who you are as a person and then what the program is all about as well. And yeah.
Yeah, another thing that I found like super frustrating was the fact that we kind of applied earlier within third year, and this was for fourth year. So you're like, where do I want to be? You know what I mean? Fourth year, like you kind of have to think about like long-term game in this. And that was kind of a hard thing for me to grasp my head around. I was like, do I want to stay here? Do I want to leave? Like, which area of the country do I want to practice in? So that was kind of something that I don't know if a lot of students are experiencing that, but it's something that I experienced.
Yeah, I do wish that we had a little bit more time. For us, we barely started clinic by the time I had to pick programs, so I didn't even know what area of podiatry I wanted to practice in. So how can I say I want trauma if I've never really seen it, kind of thing. But again, you just reach out to people. So to go back to the initial question, I again am in the Midwest. I'm from Temple. This is very much Shoal and Kent territory, and there's not a lot of Temple students that end up here, but I'm going all in. So that's not to say, don't put your best foot forward and kind of try your hardest, reach out, make sure that the program knows you're there. When reaching out to programs, ask the director, straight up, I am from Temple. You have not taken Temple resident in 4 years. Is there any particular reason for that? So it just kind of depends on how much you want it and how hard you work.
I would never be that straightforward, but props to you for being that.
I must say that's quite the approach there. But you did your research, so there's something to be said for that. You all any of you approached a residency that may not have a clerkship? And I know, did you focus on applying to clerkships in that area? Do you try to network with these programs when you're in the region? Thoughts? Abhinav, you nodded your head there. Feel free to jump us off on this one.
Yeah, so I came across a program that I was possibly interested in, and they didn't have a clerkship on. I found out that program was really academic heavy and they have a lot of good case numbers, and most of the residents have good numbers when it comes to surgeries, but I liked how they knocked them out real quick, and then after that it's just like practicing more on your skills. So I did look into it and I considered it a lot. I know there were several other programs nearby that I can possibly clerk at and then maybe go visit. But the advice I got was you don't want to visit a program during clerkship. So I don't know. But I ended up not applying just because I only have 5 months and have to really choose hard and consider what I really want. But I did come across a program that I liked, but that didn't offer a clerkship month.
I've never experienced that when I was originally applying, but due to COVID, that's something that a lot of us right now are experiencing. Like programs that we've had or had scheduled have canceled on us, and we're kind of having to they're not taking students due to this. So we're kind of going in blindly to interviews. Like, should we interview there? I didn't spend time there. Is it an option for me still, etc. So that's something that I originally didn't sign up for, but I'm kind of experiencing now, not doing a clerkship at a particular hospital or even getting to visit and having to consider potentially doing a residency there. So. And
yeah, go ahead.
It's not fun.
Yeah, so I mean, with COVID throwing a wrench in kind of everything, one of the things that a lot of the programs are doing and a lot of students are doing currently when they can't get to a particular clerkship, whether it's canceled or your school doesn't let you, whatever it may be, or they just don't have a clerkship, you can always ask them in regards to their academics, if you can participate in any kind of academics that they have, any kind of things that they may be going on at that program. That's something that's pretty prevalent right now, as most things are being done through Zoom and virtual types of learning. But I mean, maybe in the future, maybe next year, there'll still be, some Zoom meetings and that you can kind of get in touch and be a part of.
That's really great feedback. That's good advice. Akram, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was going to mention that aside from the program itself not having a clerkship, when you go down to CRIP, you've only clerked at 6 programs and you may list 20 to interview at just to kind of cover all your bases. So COVID or not, you're going to be in the experience of interviewing with a program that you have only, talked to online a couple of times or maybe visited here or there or kind of went in blind. So I think it's just kind of good practice to read up on the program, the director, if there's anything that they published recently. And once you've kind of gotten your bearing as far as academics and stuff, it should be pretty smooth. Once you've kind of gone through the ringer by the time interviews come around.
So let's talk about this briefly for a second. Obviously, due to the pandemic, and you all have mentioned it, programs are canceling. Okay, we understand that. How are you guys showing programs that you're interested in them or that you're still interested in the program? How are you demonstrating that?
I think Crystal touched on it a little bit. You can go, Hector, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so like I stated earlier, I was one of the students that reached out to most of the programs that I applied to. So I developed some kind of relationship with a resident or a director just before applying. Then I got accepted to further externship. And then so now it's kind of easy once if they cancel or not cancel, just to reach out to them and say hey, is there something can I visit a clinic? If I can't visit, is there academic meetings I can join on Zoom, Israel was saying? Just trying to get any kind of FaceTime with them, or even if it's just kind of tell me more about your program through text or through a phone call. Just trying to get more information on the program, and FaceTime with the residents is kind of crucial, just to see, like Abhinav mentioned earlier, if your personalities mesh and if you guys are compatible, because it's a speed dating situation. You're going to be locked in there for 3 years. So you really want to be happy where you go and have good coworkers that you can lean on for support.
Yeah, they already mentioned it. I know a few of my colleagues have had programs that have kind of canceled last minute, so it's not like they can go elsewhere. And what they decided to do was keep engaging in academics. Sometimes they'll offer to even do a presentation during the academics if they're not an extern or a resident there. And whatever the program offers, the programs are also in the same situation. They have lost out on clerks as well. So they're trying their hardest to figure out how to decide what student to take as a resident. And if you're putting yourself out there and saying, I am free on Tuesdays at 8 a.m. if you want. I remember one of my colleagues was in Philadelphia and the program was in California. So he woke up 3 hours earlier, or, I think it was the other way around. He was in California and the program was in Philadelphia, and he'd wake up at 5 a.m. to get into their 8 a.m. academics to just kind of prove that, I am invested in this regardless of where I am. And I think they take that a long way, especially now.
I totally agree.
So it sounds like even as, an upcoming second year, or for folks that may have been planning on connecting with some of these programs over the course of the summer and now they can't, any sort of connection is a good thing, whether it's, FaceTiming with the residents there, or just some sort of outreach works in their favor down the road, hopefully. Okay, good. So well, first of all, let's touch on briefly, when did you all start thinking about externships? Abhinav, I know you said you started thinking about externships the minute you started podiatry school, and that was the year one. You were locked in and that was your focus. But when did you really start sort of considering what type of program you thought you wanted, or what sort of timeline did you all work with on that?
I can go first. Like I said, I started first year. I go to school in California, but I wanted to come back to Texas. So I was looking at a couple Texas programs. I got in contact with them. CSPM is kind of different because we do start clinical stuff our second year. So it kind of gave me an idea of what I was trying to look for. So I kind of adjusted to that. I know that our school really likes to focus on wound care, and I came to love wound care a lot. So that's what I was looking for in some of the programs. We have a lot of physicians out there with a lot of big titles that are in sports medicine. So that was also another thing I was looking at, and I would get in contact with them and ask them like, hey, whenever you were in school, what put you towards a sports medicine program, or when you were in the clerkship process or looking for residencies, what were you looking for as far as getting your wound care knowledge or, skills and like competency and all that, or whether it's sports medicine or trauma, whatever it was. So I was asking around different physicians and as well as residents and program directors as well. So I think the real planning started after winter break of second year for myself.
Yeah, I was not as ahead of Abhinav, I guess. I didn't plan as much. I didn't start thinking about it till after boards. So after I took boards, I started thinking about like more long term, what new challenges third year was going to bring, and new like decisions that I had to make. And that's when externships came up. So that's when I started thinking about more where would I want to be geographically during residency. So yeah, I didn't start thinking until summer going into third year. So I don't know if that's like a standard, but it was just me.
Yeah, I agree. Temple gives you your summer off after the first year, so I had visited some programs just while shadowing physicians, but I waited till boards because honestly, you don't know where your grades are going to be at that early. You don't know if you're even going to pass boards on your first attempt. There's so many other things going on, so you definitely want to focus in on getting your application solid before you start, putting your name out there, kind of thing. So once board results came back and that anxiety was over, I started making my list and asking around, what programs in this region are good? Do you suggest I go here or there? And I started with a very wide list of maybe 40 programs all over the country and then just kept narrowing it down from there. So like Hector, it really was kind of as third year began that I really started honing in on that.
Yeah, I wasn't as proactive as maybe Abhinav was in terms of figuring out what programs that I wanted to apply to. The summer before my first year, one of my really good friends was entering his third year, entering the time where he was applying for clerkships. And I had come the summer right before here to Des Moines. And so I spent a lot of time with him during the process of him picking out his clerkships way before I knew anything about it. And so he has been a profound influence on me in terms of clerkships, in terms of where to apply. He's obviously now in residency. And it was something that I've always had at the back of my mind in terms of where he was during his fourth year or my second year, what he was up to, what programs he went to, what programs he suggested. He was graduated at the top of his class, and he was a very smart guy. And I, things as I started to kind of grow into it, I had an idea of what he did, during my first year and where he applied to, and things kind of evolve as you grow into it. And I'm sure by now, the third years now have an idea of kind of what they want to do, kind of where they want to be geographically, and it might evolve from when you were first year to now. For me, I started that whole process of really looking at these programs around my second year when my friend was out on his externships. And I kind of looked into these things, and there was a residency survey, and I looked at the residency survey, and then the APMA did the externship survey, and I looked at the externship survey. And there was a lot of considerations. And I think the earlier that you do start, the better off you are in terms of knowing what you want to do and where you want to go.
Oh, you brought up like a super valid point. It's like you had like someone that you looked up to that was 2 years ahead of you. I didn't have that, but I was a kid that would like text those people that was 2 years ahead of me, like during when I was picking out externships, because that was their first year of residency. I asked where they externed, because a lot of them went all over the place. Like, did you like this program? Did you like this area? So that was also, that's a solid advice. Look at the class 2 years ahead of you.
Yeah, I guess that's the biggest advice is to actually, I guess, current second years now that are, looking at clerkships or possibly next term are taking boards. Get to know the third years that you had whenever you were first or current fourth years right now, just because we're going through the process, and then also know the class ahead of you, just because they're right in the process and right along that time frame that you might be looking at stuff, and things can change within a year. As we have found out, things can change within weeks during these times. But it's good to know your upperclassmen because they may offer some valid experiences to you, especially if you trust them and you know them pretty well and you've got along with them. That sort of, that their personality is sort of similar to yours if you really got along with them, and you can really take in their advice and hold it to another level rather than someone else telling you something negative about a program. But if you trust this person, they tell you something positive, then that positive is going to carry more than that negative that some random person told you. So, and everything comes with a grain of salt. So it's all about who you trust and what information is valid out there, and what you actually take in from it.
And of course, who the person is. If somebody's really into the academic portion of podiatry and they want to put out as many articles as possible, that may not be something you're into. So they may say this program is amazing, but you know that their interests lie in a different area. So that's why the residency and externship survey helped a lot. It was, you're compiling 5 or 6 different answers to a topic that kind of gave you a good medium.
I'm going to jump in there and ask, do you all know when the next externship survey will be published and the next residency survey?
Israel.
So I'll speak a little on that. The next externship survey was in the process of being planned. Unfortunately, with COVID-19 and all of the unfortunate concerns and problems that we've been dealing with, it hasn't been sent out. It was something that we were planning to do fairly recently and send out that survey to the students. There's kind of a lot of logistical problems kind of with it now, in terms of the students that were fourth years are now residents and are now very busy in terms of sending that out. It would kind of be difficult to get a large response in terms of them sending out, putting in responses about externships that they did, last year. We're not, long story short, we're not entirely sure when the next one is going to come out.
That's fair. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to put anyone on the spot or ask a loaded question there, but that makes sense. So it sounds like, in short, stay tuned because we're working through that there. So, and I think Hector sort of touched on this earlier, and you all have sort of mentioned this, in your outreach to these programs, you sort of add some sort of personal touch if you have some relationship, pre-existing relationship or connection with the resident, right? And you sort of frame it in that context. So how do you all get to know these residents or residency directors? Are you meeting them at meetings? Are you just running into them at school? What outlets have you all turned to sort of make these connections?
So I could, Barry does a really good job. I can't speak in other schools, but they have a residency fair before every school year starts. So they bring residents and residency programs from all over the country. So that's a plus, because you get a little bit of face time, you get to find out some information. So I started going to that actually as a first year, but it just was something that I just went to for fun. It wasn't something that I had on my mind already, but definitely it got, like, you collect cards, you collect phone numbers, you kind of add them on Facebook throughout that time. So that's kind of something you build a relationship over your time. Also, we have residency roundtable, which is where residencies in the area come and speak to the students. And this happens like 4 times a semester or something like that. I'm gonna say 3 times. And that's something, if you're looking to stay in the area or not, like that's a plus as well, because you get to meet residents from the area. They kind of answer questions. They kind of get to like the down and dirty of each program and all the details. So that was kind of something that I felt like Barry did really well to prepare us for externships, or the selection of externships.
Yeah, so Temple has a little bit different. They have a program come in on individual days for the entire first semester. So it's a little bit more one-on-one time. It gives them like a 30-minute lecture, and you can talk to the residents or director or whoever they sent after. So if your school provides that, I think that's a great opportunity. I think most of us here were blessed to be able to attend the APMA meetings and stuff like that and be able to meet a wider array of doctors. But you know, if the APMA meeting is in your region next time, I would suggest you go there. I remember when I was in DC, a lot of Temple students came down and met a lot of the residency directors there. There's also state conferences. You know, Michigan holds an MPMA conference every year. California does something similar. So if you know there's a region you're looking at specifically and you have some free time, all of those residents are going to be out there kind of giving presentations and just kind of mingling with each other. And I think that'd be a great opportunity. If you find yourself with a few weeks off, I would visit the program and kind of get in touch with alumni. For me, the third year student at the time who was a first year when I was picking programs was a previous delegate, Rami, and he was like, you know what, I've never been to that program, but here's somebody I know who did. So, you know, it's a very small field and a wide network you can build just off of the people you know, even if you don't get those opportunities to travel.
Alumni are always a good bet.
I think the other thing that helps us out is that every school is in an area with a lot of residency programs nearby. I know CSPM, we rotate at one of them as students, so we kind of build a great connection with that residency program. And the directors were from another, that graduated from a different residency program that may know the program itself, or they're a spouse of another residency director. So you can kind of get information that way. I know we have a residency prep club. We invite different residency programs over, do like an hour-long lunch shift session to just teach us about, oh, how do you apply, or what makes a candidate stand out. We also do the residency fair. I think every school does it. I believe this year it's going to be a national thing where it's held over like a weekend or 2 weekends, or I'm not sure what it was. I think your deans might have already sent out an email about that, but definitely do attend the residency fairs. You do get a lot of face time with either the residents that are presenting or the directors themselves that are coming out. That's how I got involved. Like Hector mentioned, he went his first year. I went during my first year. That's how I started planning, because I met one of the directors there. And every year I went, I kind of sort of built a relationship with the directors and residents itself, and sort of catered my academic lifestyle that way.
Yeah, I think really just take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. There's a lot of opportunities out there that you can do, whether it's at your school or your nearby areas, your hometowns, whatever it is. There's a lot of things to do and a lot of ways to get in touch with residencies and programs, and just take advantage of it.
And hopefully, assuming we are allowed to have meetings again next year, the APMA conference will be in Denver. So you can go ahead and save the date for that and start thinking then. And we'd love to have you all. And in the meantime, you all are welcome to join us for our summer series, which is the virtual option that we're offering this year. Again, something we sort of loosely touched on earlier, and I'll make this my last question and then we'll wrap up. Final thoughts. Scope of practice, is it something that should carry a lot of weight when deciding your programs? Are you focusing more on geographic location? It sounds like it's sort of a personal choice, right? Hector, do you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, so that was actually a question I had when I was looking at programs, is like some states have better scopes of practice than others. So that's a question that I asked in attending actually when I was at a residency fair. And he just basically told me, like, if that's out of the scope for a podiatrist in that state, you'll be trained from it from an ortho perspective. So you'll still get those numbers, you'll still get that experience. And if you ever go to practice at a state that has that scope, you'll be fine. You'll be trained at it because you would have the experience doing residency. So every residency is going to offer you the same experience in regards to ensuring that you get the adequate numbers required to graduate that residency program. That's pretty universal across the state, across the country. So I'm from Florida, and I go to school in Florida, and we have a pretty good scope here compared to other states. So that was one of the reasons I was like, should I leave? Should I stay? Etc. And honestly, doesn't matter. That was a consensus I got across the board. You could stay, you could leave. You're going to get your training anyways, and if you want to come back to the state, you're going to be adequate enough to know how to do that rear foot, forefoot, and all in between. So I don't think it matters. I think you should go geographically or whatever it is that it's more of a deciding factor for you personally. But I don't think scope of practice should be what limits you as far as residency.
Yeah, I think more than scope of practice, it's the individual hospital policies. I know the residency survey covers that as well, but does that hospital give ankle fractures to the orthos or the podiatrists? The podiatrist may have a scope to do that, but if the hospital policy is, rear foot trauma goes to ortho, then that's a different consideration. And also, how many residents are there? If there is a orthopedic residency there and a foot and ankle fellowship that rotates through there, then that podiatry may get a little bit less of the case volume. They have to split it with their colleagues. But if there are no ortho residents there, then my best friend from high school just matched out a program with no ortho residents, and he's scrubbing in on knee surgeries because when he's on that floor, they just need all hands on deck. So I don't know if the scope is necessarily what matters so much as how is the hospital administering that scope when it comes to your training.
Yeah, I agree with Akram. When I was setting out my list of priorities of what I'm looking for, I didn't really have scope on there. I really didn't care much for it. I think it's all about hospital privileges because you might get trained and your state might allow, like, let's say, for example, ankle, like rear foot stuff, but if your hospital doesn't have that privilege for you, then that scope really doesn't matter to you. So hospital privilege was definitely one of my I guess, choices and my rankings that help what I deemed was important to me when I was picking out programs.
Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't really be a consideration. Like Hector said, no matter what, you're going to get your numbers. You're going to get all those surgeries done. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of considerations to take in mind if you want to be in that same area where your residency is. That's something to keep in mind in terms of scope, but that really shouldn't decide where you go for your clerkships or for your residency.
All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. We're bumping right up to 3 o'clock here. So before I hand it back over to Abhinav to close this out, next month we're going to host another student webinar. Abhinav, help me remember the topic here. I wrote it down. How to excel academically in your first 2 years of podiatric medical school, 2 years and beyond. So we're not going to limit it there, but we've got a really great student panel lined up. So we're nailing down details now of date and time. Stay tuned for more information. Lastly, this is my final plug. At APMA, we are currently in the process now of coordinating our fall student orientations. So these are orientations that we do with first-year students. So any of the new incoming students that are starting this fall at each of the colleges. And this year, we want to include a short video featuring you all, current students, welcoming the new students and explaining why you think APMA is important. So we're looking for you all to help us. If you'd like to participate, please send a short video under a minute. It can be shot on your phone, your iPad, whatever, introducing yourself, welcoming the incoming students, and just sharing a little bit of information about APMA and our student resources like these webinars. You can email your videos directly to me at takildale@apma.org. That's a mouthful. It will be up on the website later. The winner will be selected by August 3rd, and their video will be featured in our presentations that we'll share at the colleges, and we're giving away a $50 Amazon gift card. So with that being said, I'm done. Abhinav, take it away.
So I want to thank everyone for their great questions and taking the time to join us for the afternoon's webinar. Special thank you to our excellent student panel. So thank you, Israel, Akrama, and Hector. And thank you all for your insight and advice. APMA is working to schedule another PodMed student webinar that Tiffany did mention earlier in the coming weeks. So stay tuned to your email and be sure to follow us on Instagram at official_APMA. Stay up to date on all of our upcoming student activities. Until then, I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you all next time.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.